Good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Folks are just starting to come into the webinar, so we will get started and dive into the meat of the conversation shortly here, but just wanted to do a quick kickoff for this webinar series and some introductions. My name is Jenny Mattingly. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Partnership for Public Service, and I'm really thrilled to be doing this webinar tonight with our friends from Civil Service Strong, from AFGE, and from AFSA, the American Foreign Service Association, and they will each introduce themselves. And then we've got Drew as well from WellFed, and she'll introduce herself shortly. For those of you not familiar with the partnership, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit working to build a better government and stronger democracy. And this webinar tonight is part of our FedSupport series that we partner with so many other organizations who are working to support federal employees. And this one is really part of our new You Are Not Alone series. And we, along with Democracy Forward, Civil Service Strong, and then AFGE, have launched this as a rapid response initiative, really to support federal employees impacted by reductions in force and other job loss and reassignments. And so tonight we are very specifically focused on State Department and looking at some of the impacts that you all might have faced or be facing going forward. And my colleague, Shirley, who is producing tonight for us, will share the You Are Not Alone link in the chat. Throughout the webinar, though, not the chat, but go ahead and submit questions through the Q&A function. We'll do our best to answer them throughout. And if you would like to make sure that your question remains anonymous, you can click that checkbox before submitting your question. And given the complexity of all the topics, we'll try to get through every question. We may not get there, but we will continue to hold webinars on topics around RIFs and other job questions, so please be on the lookout for those. And before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that we are running at the end of a fiscal year. I know a lot of folks have been impacted by RIFs and other job changes this year. A lot of folks will be impacted tomorrow going off the DRP, and really just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for your service. I know this has been a tough year, and know that we are all here to support you and continue to support you as you go along the next stage of this. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleagues here to introduce themselves. I think we'll do, I'm just looking at order on my screen to introduce themselves. We've got Mike, and then Rushab, Rohit, and Drew. So Mike, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Jenny. I'm Mike Martinez, Senior Counsel at Democracy Forward. I work closely with our Civil Service Strong project, and I was formerly at OPM as the Deputy General Counsel, so very much deep in the civil service and RIF rules.
Hi, I'm Rushab Sanghvi. I'm the General Counsel for AFGE. As many of you know, AFGE represents civil service employees at the State Department. We work closely with our affiliate there, AFGE Local 1534, to provide representation and guidance. Thank you all for your service, and I look forward to having a productive dialogue that hopefully will provide some assistance to you tonight.
Rohit, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Drew? Oh, you're on mute. It's got to be one of us.
Oh, always. Thank you very much. My name is Rohit Nepal. I'm an active duty Foreign Service Officer and the Vice President of AFSA, the American Foreign Service Association. We represent foreign service officers and specialists at the State Department, and thank the Partnership for Public Service and Civil Service Strong for organizing this today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Drew Ty Ruby Howe, co-founder of WellFed. We are a holistic, meet you in the moment resource with community and virtual and in-person curated programming with our members and our tired and fired workforce at its center. It's wonderful to be here and to be a part of this initiative. Thanks so much for having us.
Great. Thank you all. And we'll kick this off with some conversation around some of the more job-related and legal issues around RIFs, around other things, and noting that we will turn more to some personal resources that WellFed and others of our organizations have towards the end of this conversation. So for those of you listening in to this evening, know that we'll start off and kind of transition into some other conversation later on. But why don't we start with the state of play post RIF, post a lot of job actions at the State Department? And I'll throw it open to all of you. I don't know if Rushab or Mike, you want to start about what's the state of play at the State Department, RIFs, what else is currently percolating among legal challenges and things like that.
I'm happy to start, and then I'll pass it to Rushab. So I just want to start off by saying that the way this administration is using RIFs is totally unprecedented. At OPM, we didn't deal with them that often, even though we own the regs, because they were just a rare, use of that authority. So the pace and the complexity of all these is new to everyone. So often I hear from friends who are in government, they say, I don't understand the RIF regs. And I say, no one does. And they're arcane, that they haven't been updated in a while. So a lot of us are just catching up. And I just wanted to lay that out. So if you feel confused, I mean, everyone does. And we understand. And that's why we want to do webinars like these to kind of clear up some of those areas. One thing I also wanted to mention about State Department specifically is that they don't directly follow the 5 CFR 351 RIF regulations. There's the Foreign Affairs Manual that really comes into play. So, and it essentially adopts most of that. But I just wanted to, and you may already seen this, but there are some differences which we can talk about as we go along in this webinar. And we've listed those on our You Are Not Alone resource that we have on the Civil Service Strong website. Which, with that said, I'll hand it over to Rushab to kind of give more of the details on what has happened and what we expect could happen.
Thank you, Mike. So yeah, I mean, I think sort of I can give sort of a quick overview on sort of the broader, because I know we get a lot of questions on our broader litigation that we've handled with Democracy Forward and other partners, and that's the litigation we had in front of Judge Ilston, because there was a period where we had a preliminary injunction that stayed or enjoined those RIFs from occurring, right? And then that injunction got paused or stayed by the Supreme Court. And as a result, the RIFs went forward. And so that litigation, just so you know, is ongoing. The State Department is a defendant in that litigation. We are still looking at avenues to get additional relief through that litigation for our members and for employees at various agencies affected by RIFs that we believe were issued pursuant to unlawful OMB and OPM direction. That said, there's not much going on there right now directly I can talk about, but we are at AFGE doing additional things with partners like Democracy Forward and others. We represent the employees who are what are called bargaining unit employees, so they are covered by a collective bargaining agreement at the State Department. And under our collective bargaining agreement, we have the ability to file a grievance. However, you may have also heard of an additional attack the Trump administration has leveled on the civil service, which is to take away collective bargaining rights from federal employees. And the State Department is one of those agencies where they've taken away collective bargaining rights. That said, our affiliate there continues to represent our members and continues to attempt and use these processes. And we have litigation pending in which we hope that those collective bargaining rights will come back. And so I can talk about it now, or we can talk about it later in terms of what we have going on with litigation. I'm not sure, Jenny, if that was sort of this part of the conversation, or if that would go on, when we talk more specifics.
I think why don't we do broad overview and then let's circle back to that litigation question, because I'm guessing folks may have some questions about that. Before we switch to that, Rushab, you mentioned bargaining unit employees, but Rohit, you mentioned foreign service officers, and obviously big part of State Department. And that's going to be a little different in terms of how they're impacted versus some of their civil service counterparts. And wasn't sure if you could give us a little overview of how any FSOs have been impacted by RIFs or other actions.
Sure. Thank you. We had about 250 Foreign Service officers or specialists who were RIF'd, so considerably smaller number than our civil service colleagues. But, I think one of the things that really stands out for me is the Foreign Service is very small. We are, almost a family. We all know each other. We end up living overseas together. And so I'd say the impact of the RIFs has been pretty dramatic, even though the number, again, relatively modest, particularly compared to the civil service number. One thing I'd note is, our RIF procedures, as Rushab noted, aren't part of the OPM regulations, but are covered by the Foreign Affairs Manual. And the most striking thing about what happened in July was literally overnight, the department rewrote the RIF regulations just in advance of the July 11th RIFs to change the way that RIFs were conducted, most notably to move from worldwide competition, which makes sense for an organization where we're posted, or our foreign service colleagues are posted all over the world, to doing it by offices. And the practical effect of that was that we had the majority, based on our AFSA survey. The department isn't actually giving us this information, but we surveyed RIF'd members, and the majority of the foreign service staff that were RIF'd were in competition groups of one person. So no real competition, which is, which speaks, I think, to the degree to which the rewrite of the FAM, or the rewriting of the rules that apply to the RIFs, made these particularly unfair.
And I think that goes back to what Mike said at the beginning, is some of this is a little bit unprecedented or uncharted waters in terms of how we're navigating it, which might be, Rushab, a good then pivot back to the lawsuits and what lawsuits are out there, what's going on, what should people be aware of, and where can they find information about lawsuits?
Thank you, Jenny. So, I mean, I think there's several different, there is this one sort of larger lawsuit that AFGE, Democracy Forward, and several partners have, and you can find information on the status of that lawsuit both on Democracy Forward's website as well as AFGE's website. We have a litigation tracker. But I think the other thing to look for is what's happening with respect to other employees in your situation. And so I can speak for, and Rohit can maybe speak for what's happening with the AFSA employees, but we represent the civil service bargaining unit employees. And so for those employees, there's a couple of different things that are going on with respect to sort of administrative litigation. So first, as I noted, there is a collective bargaining agreement that covers these employees. And so AFGE has filed a grievance, 2 grievances actually, because we have 3 different collective bargaining agreements that cover our State Department employees. And we filed grievances for class grievances to cover all of those employees. And those grievances, make several different arguments about why the reductions in force were improperly done, and request that they be reversed and that employees get back pay. We have, there's regular union meetings. So if you go to our website, you can get a link to your local affiliate, which is AFG Local 1534. And they hold regular meetings on what the affiliate is doing, what we're doing. So you can get more information on the process with that grievance. I will note, however, I'll take it actually a step back. So when a federal employee in the civil service is subject to a reduction in force, they generally have 2 avenues to challenge that reduction in force. They can either go to the Merit Systems Protection Board and file an appeal with the MSPB, or if they are in a collective bargaining unit, they are required to file a grievance if their collective bargaining agreement allows them to file a grievance over their RIF. It's a little bit complicated because it's essentially saying, you can file a grievance if you can file a grievance, and if you can do that, you can't file an MSPB appeal. So with our State Department employees, those that are covered by our collective bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement does allow the grieving of RIFs. So in a traditional, if we were living in a world in which, the administration wasn't acting in the reckless way it was, if you were subject to a RIF and you were in our collective bargaining unit, you would have to either file a grievance or be covered by a union class grievance. And that would be your only administrative avenue to challenge the reduction in force. And we file those grievances on behalf of our State Department employees. However, as I noted earlier, this administration has taken away collective bargaining. And so even though we're challenging that, at the moment, the agency is not acknowledging or responding to our grievances. They're saying that that we don't have these rights anymore. And so then that, because of that, there is an argument to be made that you can now go to the MSPB if you're a State Department employee covered by a collective bargaining agreement. Our local affiliate AFGE 1534 is going to file several MSPB appeals for our unit members. We had initially thought about filing what's called a class MSPB appeal. However, at other agencies, including USAID, where there have been mass RIFs, the MSPB has made it known that they're not going to certify any classes. So they're essentially saying they're not processing these MSPB appeals as classes. So instead, what we're pursuing is a consolidation strategy. So essentially, we are going to file several MSPB appeals. Our local affiliate, Local 1534, has partnered with a law firm to file several additional ones. And then we are going to ask the MSPB judges to consolidate these appeals in one. And then at the same time, we're going to provide information to our membership on how they can file their own MSPB appeals and potentially get consolidated into the ones that we are litigating, so that they can potentially benefit from our litigation of those appeals. We're also going to provide, perhaps it may be monthly, it may be more often, meetings to show our members how to continue to pursue their appeals through the MSPB process. The first meeting our local is having on that is taking place this Wednesday. I don't have the link with me, but I will make sure that it's disseminated. And it's for members of AFGE Local 1534. And again, this process we're working on only applies to those who are the civil service. It's a separate sort of there's separate sort of systems for the Foreign Service. So that's kind of what we're doing. I think the key is to keep deadlines in mind, to make sure that you're consulting with your union if you belong to one, and to sort of keep in the know about what's going on with the litigation in the event that there is anything you affirmatively have to do. So for instance, if you are able to file an MSPB appeal, you should make sure that you meet that deadline, which is 30 days from the date of your separation.
Thank you for that, and a lot of information. So I know Rushab was speaking directly to some of the union members. Mike, can you talk a little bit about MSPB appeal rights more broadly for those folks who might not be in a bargaining unit, but might be subject to RIFs if they're in the civil service?
Yeah, happy to. So we at Democracy Forward have been involved in a few cases directly, or we support some employment shops who are helping civil servants. So we kind of have seen a variety of different matters. And I would say, one, the speed at which they move, it really depends on where you live. Once you fill out your Form 185, which is the form that kind of kicks off your MSPB appeal, it automatically puts you, based on where you live, in a certain jurisdiction. So the ones in DC are moving quite slowly. The ones out elsewhere in the country are actually moving a bit faster. But that's really the way that the Civil Service Reform Act is designed, is to route these type of appeals to the MSPB, or if it's a prohibited personnel practice, potentially to the Office of Special Counsel. We've kind of have seen that office entirely shut down. That's since Trump fired the Senate confirmed special counsel. So whether that is a functioning office, I think is a question. But for now, the MSPB is moving some cases, especially out in Dallas and in California and other areas that aren't as bogged down as the DC court is. But that really kicks off, like I said, with the Form 185, and we have a checklist on our Civil Service Strong website to kind of, once you receive your notice, what to do next. But that is a pretty simple document, and it might take you probably 30 minutes to fill out. It's just a form. It does have boxes where you can you can elaborate on your claims, but most filings do have an attachment where they can
And we did put, for those of you watching the webinar, we put the guide, that checklist, Mike, that you mentioned about how to file your own self-appeal, because you can, knowing that deadlines are tight, and I know folks are looking at those deadlines, you can appeal on your own. You can file that at least and get that in. And then there's an effort that many of us on this call are affiliated with called the Rise Up Federal Workers Legal Defense Network. And that also is a place where you can go and get some pro bono legal counsel as well for that. So wanted to make sure folks have those two resources. Rohit, I know one of the things that you have that AFSA put together, and it might be helpful to walk through that because it's some of the things that you'll need if you want to file an appeal, or just as you're looking at unemployment insurance or anything else, or forms like your SF50 or other things. And you have a virtual go bag that AFSA created that lists some of those things that employees should be thinking about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the virtual go bag is up on the AFSA website. It is, of course, for our members only, but you can find it on our 2025 resource hub. And it really does give a sort of walkthrough on how you could very quickly get everything you need in terms of the documents, like Mike mentioned, your EOPF, but also some State Department specific documents, our employee evaluations, language scores, which play a potentially big role in our RIF calculations, and other documents that exist on the website. I did want to just take a second to go back and talk a little bit about some of the differences between the Foreign Service and the Civil Service as Rushab laid out in terms of seeking redress to these RIFs. We do not have appeals set forth in our collective bargaining agreement. Rather, we have a board called the Foreign Service Grievance Board, which adjudicates, which is an adjudicative body established under our Foreign Service Act, which actually takes on these appeals. Unfortunately, the Foreign Service Grievance Board has taken a very narrow view of the types of cases that can be appealed or grieved. So really, they have to be, reprisal, interference in performance of duties, and really inappropriate uses of the RIF authority. And given the narrow view that the grievance board has taken, our recommendation is generally to Foreign Service employees to not file a grievance, but to file an MSPB appeal, which then takes us into the same space that Rushab was describing in terms of the unavailability, at least at this time, of class certification based on the decision in the USAID case, and the need to file individual appeals. Like AFGE, we're providing resources to our members to assist them with filing those appeals. And we are having a meeting on October 8th, which is our next, which was our next meeting, a second meeting for our RIFT employees. If anyone on the call is a RIFT State Department Foreign Service employee and wants to join that and hasn't been informed of it, they can reach out to us at member@afsa.org, and we'll give them the details for that.
Great, thank you. One of the things we've been talking a lot about, obviously, are RIFs and MSPB appeal rights, but noting that we're on the 29th of September and we've got a question around it. is the DRP, the Deferred Resignation Program. And I know some folks have probably taken the DRP or have considered it. And so one of the questions is about any litigation that's different from RIF litigation that it impacts folks who took the DRP, or if there's anything that folks should be thinking about differently on that. And I don't know, Rushab, Rohit, or Mike, if you have any thoughts on that.
So I can say that, so we do have, again, we partner with Democracy Forward and some other federal sector unions. We do have a lawsuit in Massachusetts over the original DRP that was issued by OPM. It's a complicated lawsuit, and it's currently up on or will be on appeals at sometime soon. So there's not much I can really say with respect to how it affects employees. I will note that the DRP is different and has been sort of implemented differently in this sort of secondary DRP at different agencies. We're here to support you. If you are in a collective bargaining unit, or you are a member of our union, you can feel free to contact us, and we can direct you to others who are in similar situation who might be able to provide you additional guidance. But that's kind of all I can say right now on that.
Thank you. That's helpful. One other couple questions that are also coming through. One of the things that we heard in other webinars, and I'm seeing some questions on this, is folks are interested in potentially filing appeals for themselves, but they haven't received some of the paperwork from their agency. Maybe they aren't able to download their SF-50. What should folks be thinking about, and how should they go about trying to get their paperwork if they do want to file an appeal? Mike, go ahead.
Happy to jump in. Most of the documents, at least for most agencies, and I believe it's the same for state, are online at the EOPF. It's your personal, file where you can go in there and see not just the SF-50, but many other documents that relate to your employment. So I wouldn't necessarily wait for the agency to give me anything. I think if you have access to that, you should go on there and download those documents. And if you don't have access, I think you could request that documentation. You're entitled to it. So I would do that as soon as possible, and not really wait for them to act, because what we've seen is that even documents are supposed to give you, like a retention register, for example, that once you have your RIF notice, you're entitled to see it. Many agencies are dragging their feet on even showing that to employees. So yeah, like I said, you want to take a look at the checklist and make sure that there are certain items that you have access to, and if you don't, you should bring that up right away.
So Jenny, I'll just to add to that, I think, like, if you are unable to get the documents for whatever reason by the deadline for your appeal, you should still go ahead and file your appeal, and note that. I'll also note there was a question in the Q&A about AFGE recommendations, so I just wanted to just quickly answer that in terms of, like I said, our local affiliate is having a meeting on Wednesday, but yes, we are not filing a class MSPB appeal for State Department employees, because the MSPB has rejected those types of appeals. So we are we are advising that State Department employees file individual MSPB appeals, and then we are going to provide you sort of some guidance on how you may be able to get those appeals consolidated with appeals that we are litigating, so that you can benefit from the representation that our affiliate is providing, both through outside counsel and through our office.
Great. And a couple other questions, because this is starting this conversation around MSPB appeals, has sparked several questions. One is a clarification around, Mike, you had mentioned MSPB in the DC area versus out of the DC area and how it's working. To get to the answer of that question, can we take a step back and maybe go over how the MSPB appeals process typically works? Somebody files, and then what happens?
Yeah, happy to. So what happens at first is you file your Form 185, and you can do that online there's a website portal where you can submit that. is pretty straightforward. If you have counsel, you can then designate your counsel there, and they can get notification of that too. At that step, you wait a few days, and then you get an acknowledgement notice, which is the MSPB acknowledging that they have received your paperwork, and they often accompanying that is often an order that sets out a certain schedule going forward. But that also can take some time, and I think that what we've seen is the folks who live in the DC area are routed to the DC MSPB office, and that has been pretty slow. They're just most of the civil servants live in this area, so I think that makes sense. But the ones that are out in Dallas or in California have moved quite quickly. What's happening now too is folks who live in the DC area and file and are routed to DC are then being reassigned out to different offices, and that's been good to actually get those cases moving. And you don't have to go and appear in Dallas or San Diego. This is all virtual. Usually you have status conferences that are done over the phone or through Zoom. So it's all pretty easy for the employee to appear in these. And I just want to maybe touch on timing, because I know I've seen some questions here about the RIF timing. It's really your offboarding date is when the clock starts. When you receive a RIF notice, and then usually have 60 days, but they've been trying to cut that down to 30 days in some instances. That's not when your clock starts. It's when you actually are terminated from your employment. That's when your 30-day period starts. And I think what we saw, and I believe over the weekend, is OPM guidance on a potential shutdown that's happening. And there's a question there at the very end. There's a whole section R, which hopefully we can put it into the chat. Section R deals with RIFs. And there's a Q&A that says, what happens if there's a shutdown and my termination date happens during the shutdown? And OPM at least taken the position that the shutdown does not impact your date. You basically are offboarded potentially during that shutdown, which I think is, I haven't seen before, but we have noticed that is their current guidance on it. So I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's different than before. And this notice, and we'll put it into the guidance, we'll put it into the chat in a moment here, is new. And so I think for folks who have heard us on previous webinars or other things, this is just a different situation. So encourage people to take a look at that. You mentioned RIF registers and other information that might be on an SF50 around dates and other things. What should an employee do if anything they see on there is incorrect on their SF50, or they get paperwork that they have questions on? I don't know if Mike, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, so when you have a RIF notice, you're entitled to see certain documents, and one of those is your retention register, which is essentially like a list of positions in your competitive area and where you stack up, vis-a-vis your other colleagues that also receive the RIF notice. And into that is a couple of considerations: your time and your position, your veteran status. I believe language is also considered as part of the Foreign Affairs Manual. So all that together, it gives you a ranking basically, and you are then listed. What happens usually, and not in this administration, is that there's a real effort to place you elsewhere within your agency. But in this administration, they're defining competitive areas so narrowly that it's been quite hard for folks to be placed into a different part of their agency. But normally that's what it's for, and you have a right to see it. And if there's an error in it, you should bring it up immediately and note that. So if you do file your appeal, that could be one of your claims, that the retention register was incorrect. By regulation, the agency has to comply with the regulations very strictly. So any trip up like that could be grounds for them reversing your termination.
So a lot of this, again, is make sure you have paperwork, make sure you go get that and ask for that. Rohit, are there other questions that you're hearing from AFSA members or from FSOs more broadly about types of information they need, or questions on deadlines, or just things that we've touched a lot on civil service? And I want to make sure there aren't other foreign service related questions we haven't touched on.
No, the deadlines are the same for the MSPB for foreign service as they are for civil service. There's a slight difference in terms of the types of claims that people can make in an MSPB context for foreign service. There's certain things aren't available to foreign service that are available to civil service. Those are things that we can help folks identify, and that, of course, a lawyer, if you choose to go that route, will assist. We at AFSA have worked with met with a number of law firms, but have met with three, or have identified three firms that are willing to collaborate on foreign service related cases and have a reduced retainer. So anyone on the call who's interested in that information can reach out to us at member@afsa.org. One new twist I just note for the foreign service folks is we are in the middle of, despite all of the excitement about the RIFs, we are also in a regular bidding cycle right now, and we're getting a lot of reports that a number of positions have been frozen, which is causing some anxiety about what that means in terms of people being able to secure their onward assignments, which is very fundamental, of course, in the foreign service, since our positions continuously move. So that's something that that AFSA is looking at very closely.
If I could just add one thing about the process for the MSPB, like I said, when you initially file, you go to an office, and that's handled by an administrative judge. So I think a lot of us are hearing about the lack of a quorum at the MSPB and what that means. Does that mean it's not actually functioning? And the answer is that there's a lower level than that that deals with administrative judges, and they handle your appeal first. You go through a discovery process. Once they have jurisdiction, you get a chance to ask for documents. You get a chance to potentially depose folks who are involved with your reduction in force. And then after that, you're entitled to a hearing, which happens about 120-ish days after you first file, normally, although things have been slowed down. At that point, you get a determination from the administrative judge, and it's called an initial decision. If it's good for you, that's great, and you don't have to do anything else. You kind of wait for the agency to act. They can appeal that through a petition for review to the full board, which currently has no quorum, or they can let it go final after 30 days, I believe, or maybe 60 days. And then at that point, there's an option usually to go to the federal circuit. But that's all to say that if you hear there's a lack of a quorum, that is currently true, but that won't impact you for many weeks or months down the road.
Speaking of things that might impact, and Mike, you touched on this a little bit, but I just want to make sure we answer the specific question in there, because I think it's slightly different than what you touched on, is that even though the deadlines for folks don't change given the shutdown and the new guidance that came out from OPM, that even if the government shut down, will the shutdown impact MSPB and folks' ability to file to MSPB?
It's a good question, and I've heard that in past years that there's no real difficulty with continuing to file because it's all online. I think to be safe, you may want to. I think what has happened in the past and what is normal, I think, is kind of up in the air right now. If you are able to, I would encourage you to do that. But that's just to be safe. But I have heard that in past years that you're still going to go onto the portal and file as usual. But I don't know if anyone else has other information on that piece.
No, Mike, I could just say that that's the same, in the past years, employees have been able to file MSPB appeals during a shutdown. In fact, there was a whole host of employees who were affected by the shutdown that filed MSPB appeals during the shutdown in 2017.
And one of the other questions in there, going back to clarifying some of the things we've talked about, and we'll just hold a few more questions for the time for these clarification questions, and then we'll shift to some other resources. But one of the questions I'm seeing in there is, Mike and Rushab, you talked about challenging things like retention registers, or if information is wrong. Does that hold true when you file an MSPB appeal, that you can also raise question about competitive areas or competitive levels? Does that go into the complaint as well?
Rushab, go for it.
Yeah, sure. And Mike can jump in here. Yeah, that would go those are some of the issues you would challenge in in your MSPB appeal. But just to clarify, when you file your appeal, right, it's a short statement you have to provide. It's like a little fillable box if you do it online. So you don't need to draft a complaint. When you're filing, you would just sort of include some general ideas of what you're appealing about. It's the more you can provide, the more it's helpful, but you don't need to go into super specific detail for the filing itself. It's made to be easy for people to file on their own.
Yeah, and yeah, that's totally right. And you don't have to include a whole lot. You can add an addendum which to spell out your claim in more detail if you want to, but you don't have to. And besides the kind of the run-of-the-mill RIF requirements that they can run afoul of, what we've seen a lot are First Amendment type claims that based on the type of work folks are doing or the their individual status. Just to give you an example, we represent some former DEI employees who, as part of their RIF challenges, have tacked on First Amendment type claims based on the work they were doing or what statements they've made or just characteristics that are protected.
And I'm looking to see if there are any last questions here as we go through. I think one of the maybe more broadly is folks are asking implications of some of the lawsuits that have already happened or been ruled on out there around RIFs or people returning to work, things like that. Are there any final thoughts on legal implications that folks should be aware of or precedent that's been out there?
I think like as many of us have said on this call, right? A lot of this is unprecedented, not only in the actions they're taking, but sort of what's happening with the courts. And so I don't think there's anything specific that you should be aware of at this point. I think just to know that we are going to try, and I know all of our partners, everyone on this call is going to try and provide more information as it becomes available. So to keep updated with your unions, with AFGE, with AFSA, with Democracy Forward and Civil Service Strong in the Partnership for Public Service. That would be helpful. And just to know that we are trying our best to litigate and to provide support for you in every way we can, because we understand how important what you're doing is. And not only us, if you look at the lawsuit that we filed with Democracy Forward, there are so many other plaintiffs who understand how important this work is. So just understand that we are trying, and we're gonna be there with you as best as we can.
And you did a great segue into my next question. So thank you for that. Unexpected that you jumped right in is that we all are, and many other groups too, doing a lot of things to put resources out there to answer questions. And so this is probably a good segue into where can folks find resources. I know we talked about the You Are Not Alone, but Mike, do you want to talk a little bit more about You Are Not Alone, and then Rushab and Rohit talk a little bit more about what other resources besides some of the ones we've put in the links people should be looking at on your websites or expecting that might be coming?
Yeah, so I would maybe start with the general Civil Service Strong website, at least for Democracy Forward's perspective. We have many different resources on there, one of which is the You're Not Alone project that we work closely with Rushab and his team and the partnership on that, and it's been great. And I think that really stemmed from some of these MSP cases we thought were going to be class certifications, and they were denied. So there was a real question of how can we spread information quickly and efficiently to folks who are kind of left out. They feel left out of this process, which is kind of how this name, I think, was selected. You were actually not alone in it. There are many people thinking about these issues, and we want to be able to share that information in a way that makes sense for everyone. So we have the online resource, which is if you go on it, it's a web page that has some information on kind of some talking points for folks who may want to kind of advocate for RIF employees, why the RIF is going to be impacting, the country basically. You all do great work and are an important piece of the social fabric, and those jobs going away is a real harm to society. And then we get into actual resources, a checklist of what you should be looking for, some information that we're receiving as time goes on. So we will update it with tips that we see out in the field of people who let us know that there's some vulnerabilities here or there, and we'll go ahead and update the resource. And then aside from the website, we actually do have things like this webinar, which is a way we can answer questions on the fly, because no matter what we put on paper, there's always the nuances that are hard to capture. So we want to do that in forums like this. But yeah, this is a project that we kicked off a few weeks back, and the State Department was the first agency, and we will continue with other agencies as we hear of more RIFs, and we'll keep going as long as we can. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that, and appreciate the partnership with all of you on this work. Rohit, I know you've mentioned where the AFSA resources are, and so assuming AFSA members can go to that webpage and find a whole bunch of different things.
Yes, we have our resource hub, which is really a one-stop landing page for foreign service officers and specialists with answers to foreign service specific questions, of course. So I'd certainly start there. That includes a reductions in force specific page, which provides a lot of detailed guidance to folks who have been subject to the RIF. And then finally, I'd note, of course, we welcome outreach from our members. If folks don't find the information they need on our website, they should reach out directly, as I said, to member@afsa.org, and we'll happily connect them to the resources that they're looking for.
Great, thank you. And Rushab, I think you all also have, besides your litigation tracker, which we put in there, a number of resources as well for members.
Yes, so there is a members only section of our website. If you go to afge.org, there's a way to navigate to it, and I will look for it in a second. That has some additional resources for members, and I think there are resources with your affiliate, right? I think our AFG Local 1534 is very well organized, and they have several meetings. Some of the leaders at that affiliate are open to questions. You can email them at any time, and they'll answer your questions. So that's what we have right now.
Great, and we've put a couple links in there as well for folks. A lot of organizations are providing FAQs on RIFs. I know there's information both on our site and I believe on Civil Service Strong and many others on getting unemployment insurance. That's something, and we did a webinar earlier, I guess last week on Thursday, that really discussed some unemployment insurance. And then there's a lot of career transition support out there, because I know legal issues are one piece of the puzzle, but there's also all these other ways that folks are supporting all of you. And so I do want to, Drew has been waiting patiently to come on the screen here and share some of the resources that WellFed has been providing, because it is about a community to support you legally, but also to support you through all of the other things that everybody's going through right now. And so Drew, would you be able to share a little bit about what WellFed's been providing to folks? And I know you might be having a few technical hiccups there. Mine was doing the same. So just want to make sure you can come off mute. Nope, don't hear you yet. Hold on one moment and let's see if we can get you on there. I think one of my...
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We were getting feedback, but I think we're okay.
I know. There's Monday. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for all of the insights that you've been sharing. And yes, I agree that it's really important that we are acknowledging that all of us who have gone through this, myself included, we really are in a position to feel an amazing amount of grief and loss in all of this. And I'm going to share a couple of slides just so we can walk through a little bit more of what we offer at WellFed. Because so much of what we are experiencing is not just professional, it's personal. And what we have been able to do at WellFed was 2 days after I myself was laid off from my position at the Administration for Children and Families, and my then colleague, now co-founder, Rebecca Ferguson Andre, was also laid off. We decided that we wanted to act, and we wanted to act quickly. We worked in experience and well-being and learning and development for our agency, and our charge was to hold space for our colleagues. That was our biggest responsibility. So it felt very natural to be transitioning the question from how are we taking care of our ACF colleagues to how are we taking care of all of our colleagues, those of whom we know and those of whom we don't know, and how are we holding space for those individuals in these moments of grief and loss and stress and question of identity, right? Because so much of our identity is intrinsically linked to the work that we do. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at WellFed, but what I want to make sure that we are taking a moment to do is just to thank you for your service. And thank you for all that you brought, all of the contributions that you've provided. It has mattered deeply, and you matter deeply. And it is our goal at WellFed to ensure that you feel nourished professionally and personally by way of our holistic and human-centered service model. So this is serving as a complement to all of the wonderful resources that have been mentioned. So Rebecca and I decided in the very beginning, which was back in February, that we were going to provide an environment for a small event. We had a space sponsored, we had pizza sponsored, and we brought together 20 of our fellow colleagues, many of whom were from ACF and HHS, but also from USAID and other really prominent agencies. And we brought folks together for meditation, a workshop on change management, and art therapy, because I'm a professional fine artist. So we wanted to infuse some art therapy into practice. You'll see the picture there at the bottom of the screen. And NBC4 walked in through the doors, and we weren't expecting them to show up, but they did. And from that moment, and the moment that evening that that feature was on the news, it went viral. And what we had anticipated to be just this singular event all of a sudden became something much larger, because we knew that there were so many people out there who needed to feel that community and needed to feel seen and heard and valued. And so we ended up creating WellFed, which is a social impact startup that serves now a little over 2,000 fired and tired, primarily federal workforce colleagues. And we've had the opportunity to grow our team. So you'll see here we have 5 members of our team, all of whom come from our agency. And we've had the opportunity to continue to build on that leadership together. And what we offer in our expertise is, like I mentioned before, a holistic meet you in the moment support. So we all know that we take different paths on the road to transition, and we are there to offer support that is appropriate for every single point on that path, wherever you are at whatever time. So you'll see here many of those resources mentioned: financial triage. What are you doing about retirement? How are you managing your finances in the moment? How are you thinking ahead? Also goes for insurance, that kind of really important tactical, actionable resource support with subject matter expertise. And then we're also providing resume AI assistance. We're providing panels on pivoting careers, opportunities to virtually co-work with colleagues, to refine your interview skills, to transferably translate the skill set that you have, which is so incredibly valuable, into other speak, right? Into corporate and nonprofit languages, for lack of a better term, making sure that you have the opportunity to be your best self and present your best self. And what we do throughout all of those resources is providing that undercurrent, that consistency of recurring mental health and wellness. So we do this in a variety of different functions, many of which are virtual. So each week since March, so now we're at about 70 sessions that we've already had, which is pretty wild. We offer 3 weekly virtual sessions for folks to attend free of charge at the same time of day, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Monday, if you're kind of in a place where you need some extra attention toward your mental health and wellness, we have guided meditation. We bring in subject matter experts, therapists to talk about well-being practices and to have larger conversations about how to care for yourself as best you can, because in order to do this transitioning well, you have to be well enough to do it. On Wednesdays, we're offering more of that professional development, more of that tactical based, maybe finance related conversations and resources. And then Friday, as I mentioned before, some of that virtual co-working, career development, bringing in recruiters and other individuals. So these are offered every single week. And we've been doing this for quite a few months now, which has been wonderful, welcoming new folks and repeated folks. And we also curate in-person gatherings. One of our signature gatherings is our Navigate Your Next Move retreat. We actually just had this, I think, a little over 2 weeks ago. These are pictures from that particular gathering where we had a panel, keynotes, resource tables, workshops, speakers. We welcomed over 60 former feds and engaged them in conversation about what their next step could be, and fed them, because the name WellFed is very intentional. We're feeding more than just your belly, but we also make sure that we're feeding your belly too. And I want to call out just briefly an opportunity that we have for you all, if you are in the area, in the DMV area, to join us tomorrow. We have a really beautiful co-partnered opportunity to come together in community with an event called Honoring the Heart of Public Service at the end of the DRP. And we'll be hosting this event with our partners, with Civil Service Strong, Former Gov, and Partnership for Public Service. And we have the opportunity to bring folks together to really honor your contributions to federal service. So I know that Jenny and her team will be sending out the RSVP information for this for tomorrow, but it's taking place from 5 to 7:30. Like it says, big hugs and light bites, an opportunity to just be in community and connect with people who get it, because that's a really important part of all of this. Is it's easy to feel isolated, and we want to make sure that you feel seen and heard and valued in the presence of your peers, of which we are. We get it and we see you because we are you. We're going through the same challenges. So I wanted to pull up some of our social information. Please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. The QR code is here. And we also have our code for Instagram as well. And if you join our email listserv, we send out a weekly menu of all of our offerings. And that is at wearewellfed.com. And that was
That's great. Thank you, Drew. And we've put the link to your website into the chat as well. And
wonderful.
Really appreciate the focus on community, because that's so important right now. And so again, I know there are so many resources out there, and WellFed has shown you a few. There's a lot on our website, on Civil Service Strong's website, where we link to all the different places. And I'm always so grateful for all the former federal employees who have transitioned out and stood things up to support their colleagues, because I think that mission drive and public service drive is really across everybody. So I know we're close to time here, so we will certainly send out other resources following this. This will be, like I said, recorded and placed on websites, so we'll send that out. And just a big thank you to everybody tonight for the time you took to speak, and hopefully we got through folks' questions, but really thankful to all of you for being here, to AFGE, to AFSA, to Civil Service Strong, and to WellFed for continuing to support federal employees. And with that, I will just say a good night to everybody, and thank you to all the folks who tuned in this evening, and thank you for your service.